Welcome to another World of Warcraft Lore Supercut. In this video, we're diving into the entire history and the lore behind the classic World of Warcraft Horde starting zones. Our first stop takes us to the lore-rich homelands of the Forsaken, the Tirisfal Glades. We'll explore how this region was created and then named, the rise and fall of the kingdoms that once thrived across the Glades, and how it was ultimately transformed into a land of death and decay by the Scourge invasion. From there, we'll set sail across the Great Sea to explain the history behind Durotar, looking at how the Orcs went from a bloodthirsty invading force to a peaceful faction looking for a new start. And then finally, from there, we'll journey across the plains of Kalimdor to Mulgore, taking a look into the ancient heritage of the Tauren and explain how they joined forces with Thrall's new horde during the Third War. Naturally, some stories will overlap across these three zones, but leaving these connections and the overlaps in helps create a smoother, more immersive storytelling experience when looking at each individual zone. But with that being said, whether you're winding down for some sleep, looking for some lore-rich background noise to study to, or just in the mood to relax with a bit of World of Warcraft history, this video has you covered. Let's kick this lore supercut off with the haunting land of the Forsaken, the Tirisfal Glades. The story of the Tirisfal Glades goes way back to the Titanic era. Now, most of us know the basics of that story, so I'll spare you the details and hit you with the highlights. A relevant background lore speedrun, so to speak. Azeroth, discovered by the Titans, had a big problem. The old gods. Void entities determined to corrupt the planet's world soul. The Titans responded by creating an army of Titan-forged beings, including the Keepers, and together they crushed the Old Gods' Black Empire. The Old Gods' survivors, like the formidable Yogg-Saron, were locked away in prisons like the complex of Ulduar in the north of ancient Kalimdor. So far, so good. But now comes the plot twist. One of the Keepers, Loken, fell victim to Yogg-Saron's mind games. He betrayed his fellow Keepers, and his actions unleashed the infamous Curse of Flesh, turning the once immortal Titan-forged races into mortal beings of flesh and blood. Two of the Keepers, Tyr and Arcadus, foresaw his betrayal, and alongside Ionia and a group of Titan-forged allies, they fled Ulduar, seeking safety from Loken's grasp. Tyr and his allies didn't leave empty-handed though. They carried with them the Discs of Norgannon, ancient artifacts that recorded the history of Azeroth. Their mission was to uncover the full extent of Loken's treachery and protect the knowledge contained within the Discs. Upon discovering the theft of the Discs of Norgannon, Loken unleashed monstrous horrors known as the Cathraxi, and they were sent to pursue Tyr and his companions. These ancient, terrifying generals of the Old Gods, Zakaj and Kithix, tracked the group relentlessly. When the Cathraxi generals finally caught up to Tyr's party, they had reached the glades in the northeastern reaches of ancient Kalimdor. What followed was a titanic battle that raged for 6 grueling days. Arcane and shadow magic tore through the landscape, transforming the once peaceful glade into a war-torn battlefield. As the conflict reached its peak, Tyr made a fateful decision. To protect his comrades and ensure their escape with the Discs, he unleashed the full extent of his immense power in a final, self-sacrificial act.
So, if by the destruction of this body, you are purged from this world, so be it.
The resulting explosion of energy was devastating, killing one of the Cathraxi outright and forcing the other, now gravely wounded, to flee westward. In honour of her fallen comrade, Ionia named the glade surrounding the massive crater Tyr's Fall, which in the Vrykul tongue translated into Tirisfal. Alongside her followers, she buried both Tyr and his defeated foe in a tomb where they had fallen. As a tribute to Tyr's noble sacrifice, they placed his massive silver hand atop his final resting place, a lasting symbol of his bravery and selflessness. The peaceful Vrykul, who accompanied the Keepers, sought to further honour Tyr's sacrifice by settling near the battlefield to protect the tomb of Tyr. This group of Vrykul established an elite order known as Tyr's Guard. The sole mission of this order was to safeguard the tomb of their fallen leader, ensuring that it remained undisturbed for the rest of time. this area became a place of great significance and legend for the Vrykul people. However, our focus now shifts to the Dragonflayer clan of Vrykul in the north. Around 15,000 years ago, the clan began suffering the effects of the Curse of Flesh. Vrykul women gave birth to small, malformed children. Their ruthless king, Ymiron, in his fury, he ordered that these weak and deformed children must be killed. But not all Dragonflayer Vrykul could bring themselves to carry out such a cruel order. Instead, some of them chose to defy their king and sought out the legendary land of Tirisfal, entrusting their children to the Vrykul living there instead. In the ages that followed, these children and their descendants underwent further transformation, slowly evolving into a new race that came to be known as the humans. Over the course of the next several thousand years, the Vrykul gradually died out, and the humans developed independently as monumental events unfolded elsewhere across Azeroth. One of the most significant events occurred 10,000 years ago, when the ancient supercontinent of Kalimdor was shattered in a world-altering event known as the Great Sundering. This devastating rupture was the culmination of the War of the Ancients. The Well of Eternity imploded, triggering a catastrophic explosion that shattered ancient Kalimdor into the continents and oceans of modern Azeroth. With the rise of Druidism amongst the Night Elves, arcane magic was outlawed, as its previous misuse had nearly destroyed the world, and anyone who violated this law would face death. Among the surviving highborn loyalists of Queen Azshara, defiance grew. Led by Dath'Remar Sunstrider, they rejected the ban of arcane magic, viewing it as their birthright. When stern warnings from the Druids went unheeded, Dath'Remar retaliated with a magical storm over Ashenvale. Unwilling to execute so many kin, the Druids chose to exile them instead. The Highborn, eager to reclaim their freedom, departed on ships, hoping for a land where they could embrace arcane magic without restraint. The Highborn eventually reached the Eastern Kingdoms. Over time, they became the High Elves. Seeking a home rich in ley lines, they settled briefly in the Tirisfal Glades, but soon abandoned it after succumbing to madness from a malevolent force beneath the land. They eventually moved from the Tirisfal Glades and settled in the northern reaches of the Sundered Continent, where they began constructing a new kingdom, Quel'Thalas. With the elves gone, the primitive human tribes expanded across the region, but this growth brought frequent conflicts between the human tribes over land, religion, and resources. But these internal wars ceased when the tribes united to face a common enemy. The Amani, an ancient and powerful troll race, controlled much of Lordaeron, including the hinterlands, Tirisfal Glades, and Eastweald, which is now the Plaguelands. Tensions escalated as human tribes encroached on Amani territory, leading to inevitable clashes. At this point in history, several human tribes were scattered across the land, but three rose to prominence: the Arathi, the Alterachi, and the Tirisfal tribes. Warlord Thoradin of the Arathi tribe recognized that unity was humanity's only hope against the trolls. Declaring himself king, Thoradin launched a 6-year campaign to unite the tribes, forging alliances through marriage, offering peace and equality, and granting tribal leaders roles as generals in his army. One of his greatest challenges came from the Alterachi tribe in the rugged Alterac Mountains. Thoradin avoided heavy losses by defeating their leader, Igneus, in single combat, winning the Alterachi's loyalty. In the Tirisfal Glades, Thoradin faced the deeply spiritual tribes led by Lordaeron. To earn their trust, he undertook a sacred pilgrimage to their holy sites, pledging to honour their mystical traditions. Inspired by his sincerity, Lordaeron and his people joined his cause. With the tribes united, Thoradin founded the nation of Arathor and established its capital, Strom, in the Arathi Highlands. Now, the background lore to the Troll Wars is important for the story of the Tirisfal Glades, but the actual war isn't that important. And if you want to find out what happens next, there's plenty of Troll War lore in our dedicated Arathi video. The Troll Wars ended in a decisive victory for the united forces of Arathor and the High Elves of Quel'Thalas. Defeated, the Amani retreated into the hills, their power broken for millennia. After the Troll Wars, the king of Arathor, Thoradin, abdicated his throne to embark on his own journey of enlightenment. Driven by a desire to uncover humanity's origins and its ties to the Iron Vrykul, his quest led him to the ancient lands of Tirisfal. There, Thoradin delved into the region's legends and ruins, becoming captivated by the mysteries surrounding Tyr's tomb. When Thoradin arrived at the tomb, he was met by Tyr's guard, the ancient Vrykul order now led by a secretive group of humans. They firmly refused to let him disturb the sacred site. A tense standoff ensued, but Thoradin's determination prevailed, forcing his way inside. But by doing so, they unknowingly awakened the monstrous Cathrax, Scourge, buried alongside Tyr. He stood his ground as his comrades fell around him. In a final act of heroism, Thoradin drove his legendary blade, Stromkar, into Scourge's skull, halting its regeneration and forcing it into an unnatural slumber. But this victory came at a price. The battle left Thoradin mortally wounded, and the former King of Arathor succumbed to his injuries.
At last, the nightmare is over.
Tyr's guard, shaken by the events, vowed never to enter the tomb again, fearing that any further disturbance could awaken the ancient evil and unleash untold devastation upon the world. In the years following the Troll Wars, the Kingdom of Arathor continued to expand, giving rise to several key human settlements in Alterac, Dalaran, Gilneas, Kultiras, and notably the Tirisfal Glades. The Tirisfal Glades have become one of the most popular human regions, renowned for its fertile lands. Many former soldiers chose to settle there, creating a thriving community. Over time, the area was renamed to Lordaeron, a tribute to the late General Lordaeron, whose legacy continued to inspire the people. Around 2,680 years ago, the city-state of Dalaran was founded north of Strom. Many people flocked to Dalaran, seeking freedom to explore their magical potential. Using their powers, they constructed the city's enchanted spires, building a prosperous economy around their growing mastery of the arcane. However, just like what happened with the Night Elves 10,000 years ago, their unchecked use of magic began to weaken the fabric of reality, unknowingly attracting demons from the Burning Legion back to the world. The Magokrats, I think that's a word, sought aid from the High Elves of Quel'Thalas. The elves, upon investigating the disturbances, confirmed that the misuse of magic had indeed weakened the barriers between Azeroth and the Legion. To address the danger, the elves and the leaders of Dalaran formed a secret alliance known as the Council of Tirisfal, and 70 years later the Dreadlord Cathrenatia infiltrated Dalaran, spreading plagues and chaos while corrupting the civilians with the cursed blade, Apocalypse. Cathrenatia's reign of terror ended when Aladai, the first guardian of Tirisfal, confronted and banished the Dreadlord from Azeroth. This event marked the first successful banishment of a demon by a guardian. For the next 1,400 years, humans continued to dominate the lands of continental Lordaeron. However, over time, the lands surrounding the capital city of Strom became increasingly problematic. The soil in the region was just too barren to sustain the growing empire. Ultimately, the Lords of Strom, driven by aspirations of purity and enlightenment, decided to leave their historic city. Far to the north, the Lords of Strom arrived in the Tirisfal Glades, where they found scattered human settlements. Over time, they extended their influence, offered their wealth, and transformed the humble villages of the Tirisfal Glades into the grand city of Lordaeron. The city's name, of course, inspired by the land on which it was built. The city of Lordaeron experienced rapid expansion due to two primary factors. The city began as an industrial hub, supplying the growing population with essential goods to sustain their outer settlements. The second reason was its role as a prominent destination for religious pilgrimage. Lordaeron became a sanctuary for the deeply devout who upheld the teachings of the light. These two pillars, industry and religion, fueled Lordaeron's rise into a mighty kingdom. Over time, though, the city's industrial responsibilities were delegated to other emerging settlements, such as the newly established cities of Stratholme and Andahor. With its industrial role diminished, the city of Lordaeron transformed into a centre of religion and administration. Despite its breathtaking beauty, the city's walls were a testament to formidable engineering and defence, and no enemy dared challenge the kingdom, and it remained unthreatened for an entire millennium. Now, you might not believe it, but everything we've covered so far is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the history of the Tirisfal Glades. As we move into the more modern era of World of Warcraft history, things get even more interesting, starting with the arrival of the Horde. Now, of course, we've already covered the tale of the Orcish Horde's invasion, how they crossed the dark portal from their dying world of Draenor into the lands of continental Azeroth. And in just 3 short years, the Horde had succeeded in conquering Stormwind. In the aftermath of the King of Stormwind's death, Sir Anduin Lothar, faced with a kingdom in ruins, led the shattered remnants of Stormwind's army and as many civilians as he could gather away from the fallen city. They retreated across the Great Sea, eventually landing on the shores of Lordaeron. Anduin Lothar arrived at the court of King Terenas Menethil II. This ultimately persuaded the king to summon the 7 human kingdoms for an urgent council. Inside the city walls, the council deliberated for days, with tensions running high until one of Lordaeron's most revered priests, Tyrellian, delivered a dire warning. He cautioned the kings that their realms would share Stormwind's tragic fate if they failed to stand united. His plea broke the deadlock, and the human leaders voted unanimously to form the Alliance of Lordaeron. The council selected Anduin Lothar to lead the Alliance military efforts. His heritage and lack of political ties to the northern kingdoms made him a neutral and trusted choice to command fairly. With this coalition in place, the kingdoms prepared for the Orcish onslaught they knew was on the horizon. Sir Anduin Lothar recognised the need for a unifying force that transcended the disparate backgrounds of the allied nations. To address this, the Church proposed a groundbreaking solution. Archbishop Alonsus Fowl collaborated closely with Lothar to create a new order of warrior priests, individuals who could inspire and lead on the front lines with both strength and spiritual guidance. In the city of Stratholme, within Alonsus Chapel, the Order of the Silver Hand was founded. 5 of these warrior priests, known as paladins, were appointed to lead this noble order. Uther the Lightbringer, the first to be named, was followed by Dathrahan, Tyrion, Tyrellian, and Gavinrad. The order's name and the emblem were inspired by the legend of the Silver Hand, a legacy of the Keeper Tyr, symbolising light-wielding warriors who placed self-sacrifice above all else. Confident in their plans, War Chief Doomhammer anticipated striking Lordaeron before the newly formed alliance could mount an effective defence. His primary target, Lordaeron's capital city. He believed that if the heart of the alliance fell, the coalition of nations would collapse. Doomhammer's forces advanced toward the Alterac Mountains. The alliance and the Horde soon clashed in the Battle of Hillsbrad Foothills. However, fortune favoured the Horde when King Aidan Perinold of the Alterac Kingdom approached the Orcs with an offer. Perinold had been hesitant to confront the Horde, believing them an unstoppable force even for an united alliance. The sight of Orcish Death Knights, Ogre Mages and Dragons at his borders convinced him to wave the white flag, offering Doomhammer safe passage through the mountains in exchange for the promise that Alterac would be spared. The Horde quickly bypassed the Alliance mountain defences, advancing swiftly toward the Tirisfal Glades and the capital city. Upon reaching the area, Doomhammer ordered an immediate siege. While the Alliance had anticipated an eventual assault on the capital city, the speed of the Horde's advance caught them off guard. Doomhammer was confident that the city would fall once Horde reinforcements arrived from the front line in Quel'Thalas. However, delays from Horde clans in the north left behind in Silvermoon cast a shadow over the Horde's plans. Worst still, Tyrellian's army arrived from the east, forcing Doomhammer to redirect resources from the siege. The situation grew dire. Without reinforcements from the absent Orc clans, the Horde lacked the strength to storm the city. Eventually, the Dragonmaw clan arrived alone, bringing devastating news. The famous Orc warlock Gul'dan had betrayed the Horde, taking the Storm Reaver and the Twilight's Hammer clans with him to pursue his own ambitions. As if that weren't enough, Doomhammer learned that King Perinold's treachery had been uncovered. Troops from Stromgarde, led by King Thoros Trollbane, had seized Alterac and its mountain passes, cutting off the Horde's retreat and leaving Doomhammer's army in Tirisfal completely isolated. Realising the campaign was lost, Doomhammer gave the order for a full retreat to Khazmodan. And so, the Horde was driven back, retreating all the way to the Dark Portal. Some of the surviving Orcs, those who weren't captured, fled through the portal, returning to their dying world of Draenor. At Tyrellian's command, Khadgar unleashed his immense power to destroy the portal, sealing the connection between the two worlds. And in the 7th year after the Orcish invasion, the Second War was over, and the Horde had been defeated. Yet this brutal conflict would not mark the end of the trials that the forests of the Tirisfal Glades would face in the years to come. In the aftermath of the war with the Orcs, the Tirisfal Glades surrounding the kingdom flourished as a serene land of peaceful farms and quiet villages. But as the kingdom regained its strength, ancient forces stirred in the shadows. On Draenor, Ner'zhul, elder shaman of the Shadowmoon clan and war chief of the Horde of Draenor, devised another desperate plan to escape their doomed world. He sought out powerful artifacts from Azeroth, all of which he would use to open portals to new worlds. When Ner'zhul obtained the Skull of Gul'dan, its dark power corrupted him, driving him to focus on his own survival and strength while abandoning the Horde. His recklessness led him through the portals he had created, but instead of freedom, he was intercepted by Kil'jaeden, the demon lord responsible for the Orcs' original corruption. Kil'jaeden, furious at Ner'zhul's failures, sentenced him to a fate far worse than death. The demon commanded his dreadlord servants, Tichondrius, Mal'Ganis, Balnazar, Deatharok, and Varimathras, to torture and torment Ner'zhul relentlessly. Broken by their cruelty, the shaman finally begged for release. Kil'jaeden answered, but not with mercy. Ner'zhul's mortal form was destroyed, his soul ripped from his body. Kil'jaeden bound Ner'zhul's tormented spirit into 2 items, a suit of enchanted armour and the cursed runeblade Frostmourne. He then encased it in a diamond-hard block of ice and hurled into the ice-crowned glacier as the Lich King.
My fate is torment, but I will not bear this crown alone.
It was there the Lich King was tasked with carrying out Kil'jaeden's dark will to unleash a plague of undeath upon Azeroth. The victims of this plague would rise as mindless undead, eternally enslaved to the Lich King's will, spreading destruction and paving the way for the Burning Legion's return. Imprisoned within the Frozen Throne, Ner'zhul expanded his mastery over the plague of undeath. When the time was right, he sent a chilling mental call across Azeroth. Among those who answered the summons was Kel'Thuzad. After months of grueling travel, he arrived at the icy glacier of Icecrown. Kel'Thuzad knelt before the Frozen Throne and pledged his soul to the Lich King. Kel'Thuzad's first mission was to return to the lands of men in Lordaeron and establish a dark religion devoted to the Lich King. Returning in his disguise, he built a following, establishing the cult of the Damned. In the village of Brill, within the Tirisfal Glades, Kel'Thuzad conducted his first experiments with the plague of undeath. The town of Brill became one of the earliest places afflicted, and its inhabitants quickly succumbed to the plague and rose again as undead under the Lich King's control. The plague's success in Brill convinced Kel'Thuzad to urge the Lich King to hasten the invasion. As the plague spread across the northern lands and the Tirisfal Glades, it transformed the dead into feral zombies, rapidly swelling the ranks of the Lich King's army. Kel'Thuzad, witnessing the growing horde, named this terrifying force the Scourge, a relentless army that would soon bring devastation to the city of Lordaeron and beyond. Now, this is probably the moment you've all been waiting for, the introduction of arguably the greatest character in World of Warcraft history, Arthas Menethil. Son of King Terenas Menethil II, Arthas was the crown prince with a bright future, already proving himself as a mighty paladin. Arthas first demonstrated his leadership in the southern town of Strahmbrad, where he and Uther were sent to defend the settlement from Orcish raiders. These Orcs had broken free from their internment camps, posing a renewed threat. But as Arthas concentrated on the Orcs, grim rumours started to spread of a strange and horrifying plague sweeping through the Northlands. Orders from the king soon arrived, and Arthas was sent north to investigate the outbreak. There, he discovered the village in ruins, its inhabitants transformed into undead servants of the Lich King, and together they fought against the undead infestation at a granary. It was there they encountered Kel'Thuzad himself, the necromancer spreading the plague of undeath. Kel'Thuzad soon fled, but with Arthas and his companions in pursuit. By the time they caught up to him in Anderhall, the main agricultural distribution point for the region, the damage was already done. The grain they stored there had been tainted and distributed to outlying villages. Before Arthas struck him down, Kel'Thuzad revealed the name of the Scourge's leader, Mal'Ganis, a Nathrazim demon orchestrating the plague. What followed is a tale that changed the course of Azeroth's history forever. Arthas defied the Order of the Silver Hand and initiated the infamous culling of Stratholme.
This entire city must be purged.
Within Stratholme, Arthas confronted Mal'Ganis, who was already working to claim the souls of the infected. Though Arthas sought to destroy the Dreadlord in a final confrontation, Mal'Ganis retreated, taunting the prince and vowing to meet him in Northrend. Arthas pursued the demon to Northrend. There he reunited with an old friend, Muradin Bronzebeard, brother of the Dwarven king Magni. Muradin led Arthas to a legendary weapon that could turn the tide against the Scourge, a blade called Frostmourne. Unbeknownst to Arthas though, Frostmourne was cursed and bound to the Lich King's will. Believing the sword would save his people, Arthas claimed it, despite Muradin's warnings, and the prince's soul was consumed by the blade's dark power. Arthas, now transformed into the first and mightiest of the Lich King's Death Knights, with his soul lost and his mind shattered, he returned to the city of Lordaeron, not as its saviour though, but as its doom. Arthas began his campaign of destruction with an unthinkable act: the murder of his own father.
What is this? What are you doing, my son?
Succeeding you, father.
With his newfound unholy strength, he crushed the capital city of Lordaeron, leaving it in ruins. With the king dead and the capital city fallen, the Scourge swept across the Tirisfal Glades, leaving devastation in its wake. As Lordaeron crumbled, Arthas returned to the desolate Balnir farmstead in eastern Tirisfal Glades, where he committed a grim act, raising his once beloved steed Invincible from the grave as a skeletal mount. And with that final act, Lordaeron had fallen. The once thriving settlements and villages of the Tirisfal Glades had been obliterated, replaced by a landscape of death and decay. With Lordaeron in ruins, Arthas turned his gaze northward to Quel'Thalas. Now one of Arthas's most loyal servants, Kel'Thuzad informed the Death Knight that only the mystical font of elven power, the Sunwell, could restore him to his corporeal form. With this goal in mind, Arthas led his massive undead army toward the heart of the High Elven homeland. Now you're probably thinking this is the entire history of the Tirisfal Glades, not Quel'Thalas, but we're about to introduce one of the most important characters in the history of the Tirisfal Glades. Standing between Arthas and his goal were the Farstriders, the elite rangers sworn to protect Quel'Thalas. Their leader, the formidable Sylvanas Windrunner. She rallied her forces to resist the Scourge's relentless advance. Arthas and his army swept through the Elven lands until they finally confronted Sylvanas east of Fairbreeze village, not far from Silvermoon. In a desperate final stand, Sylvanas herself engaged with Arthas in combat. Though she fought valiantly, her strength was no match for the dark power of Frostmourne. The cursed blade shattered her weapons, struck her down, and pierced through her abdomen. As she lay dying, Sylvanas demanded that Arthas give her a clean death, but the Death Knight, still bitter from the fierce resistance she had shown, refused her request. As Sylvanas slipped into darkness, she felt an unimaginable agony as her soul was forcibly ripped back into the world. Arthas, in a moment of supreme cruelty, transformed the Ranger General into an undead banshee. Sylvanas was granted horrific abilities that she never possessed in life. Though bound completely to Arthas's will, she retained her self-awareness, a deliberate torment engineered by Arthas so she could witness the destruction she would bring to her own people. Now a twisted shadow of her former self, Sylvanas became both a weapon of the Scourge and a prisoner of its malice. So next up, we're going to talk about the Lich King's crack. After the Third War, the Lich King's power began to wane. When the Lich King forced the cursed blade of Frostmourne out of the ice at the Frozen Throne, it caused a crack to form. The damage was then worsened when Illidan Stormrage attempted to destroy the Frozen Throne with a powerful spell. This crack allowed the Lich King's power to slowly leak away, gradually weakening him over time. As Ner'zhul faltered, so did Arthas Menethil. As the Lich King's strength diminished, cracks began to form in his control over the minds of his undead minions. Sylvanas, along with several banshees, began to regain fragments of their own free will. She kept this revelation secret from both Arthas and Kel'Thuzad, outwardly continuing to serve while secretly plotting her revenge. Meanwhile, the Dreadlords, sensing the Lich King's growing weakness, invited Sylvanas to a meeting. There they revealed the cause of Ner'zhul's decline and shared their plans to overthrow Arthas and seize control of Lordaeron for themselves. Sylvanas agreed to collaborate, but insisted that her involvement would be on her own terms. The Dreadlords devised a plan to ambush Arthas within the capital city, but anticipating the possibility of his escape, Sylvanas prepared her own contingency. Her loyal banshees would escort Arthas to a secluded location in the forest under the guise of aiding him. After surviving the Dreadlord's ambush and fleeing the city, Arthas was led by Sylvanas' sisters to an arranged meeting point. There, the banshees turned on him, killing his bodyguards and leaving him vulnerable. Hidden in the shadows, Sylvanas struck, firing a venomous arrow she had specially crafted to paralyze Arthas. Furious at her betrayal, Arthas demanded she end his life, but Sylvanas refused to grant him the mercy of a quick death. However, before she could strike, Kel'Thuzad arrived with reinforcements of Scourge forces, forcing Sylvanas and her banshees to flee. Despite her failure, she vowed to continue her pursuit of Arthas and bring him to justice for all he had done. After the scourging of Lordaeron, Arthas departed for Northrend at the Lich King's summons, and Kel'Thuzad went into hiding. It was at this point that Sylvanas and her banshees had completely broken free of Ner'zhul's control.
You seem troubled, mistress.
Aren't you, sister? Only days ago we were the Lich King's slaves. We existed only to slaughter in his name. And now, we are free.
Sylvanas' uneasy freedom was interrupted when the Dreadlord, Varimathras, approached her with an offer to join him and his brothers in their bid to rule the Plague Lands. Refusing to relinquish her hard-won freedom, Sylvanas declined. Varimathras warned her that those who did not align with the new rulers would be cast aside. Seeing this as a threat from the Dreadlords, Sylvanas began preparing for inevitable attack. With only her banshees and a handful of lesser undead, she set out to build an army. Bolstered by her new undead allies, Sylvanas quickly defeated Varimathras. The Dreadlord pathetically begged for his life, promising to serve her and revealing critical knowledge about his brothers and their defences. Though wary of his treachery, Sylvanas saw his value and accepted his submission. Sylvanas set her sight on reclaiming the fallen capital city of Lordaeron from the Dreadlords who had now taken control. The final obstacle in her path was Balnazzar. Using artifacts left behind from the royal family, she dismantled his demonic forces. To prove his loyalty, Sylvanas commanded Varimathras to kill Balnazzar. Reluctantly, Varimathras agreed, but Balnazzar's death was a deception orchestrated by the Dreadlord brothers. The two faked his death, and Balnazzar lived. He would later resurface as the puppet master manipulating the Scarlet Crusade from the shadows, a story we're coming on to next. With an army of free-willed undead and an abandoned city at her disposal, Sylvanas laid the foundation for her new dominion, proclaiming herself Queen of the Forsaken.
From here on out, we shall be known as the Forsaken. We will find our own path in this world, Dreadlord, and slaughter anyone who stands in our way.
She established a nation for those who had broken free from the Lich King's control. She claimed the Undercity, the vast catacombs beneath the ruins of Lordaeron, as their capital. Under her leadership, the Forsaken transformed the sprawling underground labyrinth into a thriving stronghold. Varimathras informed Sylvanas of Arthas' fate in Northrend, where he had merged with the Lich King. Determined to strike back, Sylvanas turned to her followers for aid. Among them, Putris, a former Scourge who had regained free will, pledged to weaponize the Plague of Undeath for the Forsaken. Impressed by his ambition, Sylvanas appointed him Grand Apothecary and established the Royal Apothecary Society under his leadership. She imposed two conditions on him. The plague must be deadly to both the Scourge and the living, and it must be capable of killing Arthas if the chance arose. To protect his work, Sylvanas swore Putris to secrecy, knowing his experiments would provoke outrage if discovered. She also sought out her former champion, Nathanos Blightcaller. After freeing him from the Lich King's control, Sylvanas restored Nathanos to her side, naming him her champion in the Forsaken's quest for vengeance against the Lich King. Under Sylvanas' leadership, the Forsaken established themselves as a formidable force, driven by their desire for vengeance and the unyielding will of their Banshee Queen. Now, changing gears here, it's impossible to recount the history of the Tirisfal Glades without addressing the metaphorical elephant in the room, the Scarlet Crusade. After the deaths of King Menethil II and Uther the Lightbringer at Arthas' hands, the Crusades' leaders convened in Hearthglen. They debated their path forward, whether to pursue Arthas and exact revenge, or reclaim Lordaeron from the Scourge. Saed and Dathrahan ultimately directed their efforts toward the critical battlefronts of Stratholme and Anderhall to stem the Undead epidemic. During an assault on Stratholme, Saed and Dathrahan became separated from his comrades and, unbeknownst to them, was slain and then replaced by the Dreadlord Balnazar. When Dathrahan reappeared, no one suspected the truth, and his influence began to reshape the Crusade from within. These remnants of the Silver Hand forged alliances where they could, notably with the communities of Tyr's Hand, while also establishing a forward base in an old monastery near the capital city. As Alexandros Mograine turned his attention toward the Forsaken, Balnazar, still posing as Saed and Dathrahan, manipulated events to serve his own ends. Fearing Mograine's power and the threat posed by the legendary weapon he carried, the Ashbringer, Balnazar conspired with his brother Varimathras to eliminate him. Exploiting the son of Alexandros, Reno Mograine, and his desire for recognition, Balnazar convinced the young knight to betray his father. Reno led Alexandros and High Inquisitor Fairbanks to Stratholme, where they were ambushed by the Scourge. Though Alexandros fought valiantly, slaying countless undead, he ultimately fell. Reno used the Ashbringer to stab his own father in the back. Disillusioned by the Crusade's corruption and deviation from its noble origins, a number of members broke away to form the Argent Dawn, a more inclusive and principled order similar to that of the previous Order of the Silver Hand. Those who remained formally embraced the new name, the Scarlet Crusade, cementing their transformation into a radical sect consumed by their obsession with eradicating the undead at any cost. We've dedicated an entire tale to uncovering the events that transpired within the halls of the Scarlet Monastery, including the chilling story of a Scarlet Crusader who, under the influence of dark forces, was driven to commit the unthinkable, murdering his own family. If you're intrigued, you'll find 2 links to nearly an hour of in-depth Scarlet Crusader lore in the description below. Now, returning to the Forsaken storyline, Sylvanas Windrunner was determined to ensure that the Damned, like herself, had a place to call home. To protect her new nation and advance her goals, she sought allies among the factions of Azeroth. Sylvanas sent emissaries to both the Alliance and the Horde in pursuit of alliances. Excuse the pun. However, the ones she dispatched to the Alliance never returned. On the other hand, the kind-hearted Tauren of Thunderbluff offered a promising opportunity for diplomacy. The Forsaken presented themselves as seeking a cure for their degenerative condition, claiming that the shamanistic powers of the Horde and the life-giving energies of the earth might hold the key to their salvation. In return, they pledged their unwavering support for the Horde's endeavours throughout Lordaeron and Azeroth. In the end, the Tauren's influence persuaded Warchief Thrall to form an alliance with the Forsaken. This pact bolstered the Forsaken's chances in their fight against the Lich King, while the Horde gained a critical foothold in the Eastern Kingdoms, expanding their reach and their influence. After joining the Horde and establishing themselves in the Undercity, the Forsaken began rapidly expanding their influence. Their numbers surged dramatically, and by the 25th year after the Orcish Horde's arrival on Azeroth, their population had exploded. Sylvanas Windrunner, recognising the potential of her growing army of free-willed undead, strategically delegated tasks to strengthen their hold over the Tirisfal Glades. Forsaken adventurers starting their journey in the Tirisfal Glades took on critical tasks to support the greater cause. They were charged with culling the Mindless Ones, undead still under the Lich King's control, who had overrun the small town of Deathnell. In addition to reclaiming Deathnell, the Forsaken were tasked with defending their lands from external threats. They fought back against the Rothhide Gnolls, and of course, the Scarlet Crusaders. At the same time, the Forsaken began developing a new deadly plague to combat the Scourge, but with potential applications against the living as well. This initiative was spearheaded by the Royal Apothecary Society, furthering Sylvanas' ambitions while ensuring the Forsaken's place as a formidable force within the Horde. For the next 2 years, the forests of the Tirisfal Glades remained largely unchanged as the Forsaken steadily bolstered their forces. However, in the 27th year, the Tirisfal Glades would once again become a theatre of war. During the early stages of the Northrend campaign, when the heroes of Azeroth landed on the shores of Northrend to wage war against the Lich King, the Royal Apothecary Society finalised the Forsaken Blight, a devastating plague capable of annihilating both the living and the undead. During the famous battle at Angrathar the Wrathgate, after Dranosh Sourfang fell to the Lich King, Putris appeared atop of a cliff, overlooking the battlefield. Using Forsaken catapults, he unleashed the Blight on the forces below, indiscriminately killing Horde, Alliance and Scourge alike, and forcing the Lich King to retreat to the Icecrown Citadel. In the aftermath, it was revealed that Putris, alongside several members of the Royal Apothecary Society, had betrayed Sylvanas. They had allied with the Dreadlord Varimathras, who had secretly remained loyal to the Burning Legion and his Nathrazim brothers while pretending to serve the Dark Lady. Together, they orchestrated a coup and seized control of the Undercity. Thrall and Sylvanas planned an immediate counterattack to reclaim the Undercity. During their preparations, Jaina Proudmoore arrived with grim news. In the wake of Bolvar Fourdragon's presumed death at the Wrathgate, King Varian Wrynn was preparing for war with the Horde. Thrall assured Jaina that the Horde had no intention of provoking conflict and vowed to deliver justice for the betrayal at the Wrathgate. With the message sent, Thrall, Sylvanas and Vol'jin led the Horde forces in a daring assault on the Undercity, where Sylvanas personally struck down the traitorous Dreadlord Varimathras, reclaiming the city for the Horde. While these events unfolded, Jaina had returned to Varian and informed him that the Royal Apothecary Society and Varimathras had betrayed both the Horde and the Alliance, and the Horde were raiding the city. By this time, Varian had already mobilised an assault on the city, determined to bring Putris to justice and reclaim Lordaeron for the Alliance. The Alliance forces tracked Putris to the Apothecarium, where they confronted and defeated him. Tensions between the Alliance and the Horde came to a head when King Varian Wrynn confronted Thrall and Sylvanas in the Royal Quarter. A fierce battle erupted between the two factions, only to be halted by Lady Jaina Proudmoore, who froze the fighters with her magic and teleported the Alliance forces out. The battle for the Undercity marked the end of the Cold War between the Alliance and the Horde, as Varian then declared open war against the Horde, solidifying the growing divide between the factions. Later that year, the war against the Lich King reached its dramatic conclusion as the heroes of Azeroth, led by the Argent Crusade and Knights of the Ebon Blade, stormed the Icecrown Citadel and defeated the Lich King, ending his reign of terror. With the Lich King's defeat, Sylvanas and the Forsaken, once driven by vengeance, found themselves without purpose. Turning their focus to a new goal, they sought the complete conquest of Lordaeron. Sylvanas oversaw improvements to the Tirisfal Glades, starting with the transformation of Brill, installing Forsaken architecture and strengthening defences at the Bulwark. The inclusion of former Scourge members, particularly the now free-willed Valkyr, brought a new era for the Forsaken, the ability to raise new members of free-willed Undead, creating a second generation of Forsaken. 2 years later, as the world turned its attention to the mysterious Isle of Pandaria, the fight for control of the Scarlet Monastery neared a critical point. New leaders emerged to helm the Scarlet Crusade, including one survivor of the original leadership, Sally Whitemane, the High Inquisitor. But now we introduce Lillian Voss, a key figure opposing the Scarlet Crusade. She declared that the only way to truly end their threat was to eliminate Whitemane. However, this task required the use of a sacred weapon, the Blades of the Anointed, and they would be used to ensure her permanent defeat, as she would otherwise continually be resurrected. In a decisive move, Lillian joined forces with Horde and Alliance heroes to storm the monastery. Together, they decimated the remaining Scarlet forces and finally defeated Sally Whitemane. However, the Crusade's end was not absolute. 2 years after Whitemane's death, the Scarlet Crusade faced its most formidable challenge yet, the relentless assault of the Knights of the Ebon Blade. During the third invasion of the Burning Legion, the Ebon Blade launched an attack on the Scarlet Monastery as part of their mission to resurrect Sally Whitemane as a member of their new Four Horsemen. With ruthless precision, the Ebon Blade ensured that the Scarlet Crusade was utterly destroyed. As the Scarlet Crusade's reign of terror drew to a close, other forces began to rise in power.
Windrunner, come.
War Chief?
The lower spirits say death will claim me soon.
In the end, death claims us all. But the Horde will live on.
I have never trusted you. Nor would I have ever imagined in our darkest time that you would be the one to save us. The spirits have granted me clarity, a vision. They whisper a name. Many will not understand, but you must step out of the shadows and lead. You must be War Chief.
As the Burning Legion launched its third invasion of Azeroth, the devastation was felt across every corner of the world, including the Tirisfal Glades. Travad, a human paladin and leader of the secretive Tyr's Guard since the Third War, sought to protect the legacy of Tyr. He met with the High Lord of the Silver Hand to warn that recent incursions by the Twilight's Hammer had revealed the location of Tyr's tomb, jeopardizing the sacred artifact, the Silver Hand. Travad insisted it must be sealed forever, but only after recovering the hammer. The hero paladin retrieved the Silver Hand, and the group fled as the tomb began to collapse. As the last surviving member of Tyr's Guard, Travad explained that Tyr's body, the tomb's secrets, and Zakaj's prison were now buried beneath tons of stone and water. After the third invasion of Azeroth by the Burning Legion, the world faced a new crisis. When the Dark Titan Sargeras wounded the planet, Azeroth's very lifeblood began seeping to the surface, manifesting as an extraordinary substance known as Azerite. This material, with its immense power, became a catalyst for renewed conflict. Seizing the opportunity, War Chief Sylvanas Windrunner devised a plan to secure Kalimdor and destabilize the Alliance from within, hoping to trigger a political crisis that would lead to its collapse. The Horde's strategy included holding Darnassus hostage, to sow discord among the Alliance and further weaken their unity. While the following war, the War of the Thorns, is a tale for another time, its devastating climax came when Sylvanas ordered the burning of the World Tree, Teldrassil. This act ignited the Fourth War on Azeroth, as the Alliance retaliated with ferocity, marching toward Lordaeron Keep for a decisive confrontation. The Alliance, led by Anduin Wrynn and Genn Greymane, arrived in Tirisfal Glades with the Third Fleet, storming Brill as they advanced south. Horde defenders, including Varrock Saurfang, Bane Bloodhoof, and Lorgrimmar Theron, mounted a fierce defence. The Alliance forces pushed the Horde back into the capital city, laying siege to Lordaeron Keep. As the siege seemed to turn in the Alliance's favour, Sylvanas launched a counterattack. In a desperate move, Sylvanas deployed an Azerite war machine to destroy Alliance siege towers. When the machine was neutralised, she resorted to blighting the battlefield, killing both Alliance and Horde troops and raising the dead soldiers. This ruthless tactic sowed dissent within the Horde, particularly in Saurfang, who became disillusioned with Sylvanas' methods. As the battle reached its peak, Jaina Proudmoore arrived on a flying Kultiran flagship, using frost magic to neutralise the Blight and Undead forces. She destroyed part of the keep's walls, allowing the Alliance to storm the city. Reinforcements from Sylvanas' sister, Alleria Windrunner, and Gelbin Mekatork turned the tide, forcing the Horde to retreat further. After being confronted by the Alliance at the keep's entrance, Saurfang surrendered and was taken prisoner. The Alliance leaders eventually confronted Sylvanas in the throne room, and they demanded her surrender. Instead, she declared their victory meaningless, triggering a massive explosion of stored blight that flooded the keep and the surrounding city. As the throne room collapsed, Jaina teleported the Alliance leaders to safety while the Horde escaped aboard a gunship. The battle for Lordaeron left both the capital city and Brill in ruins, with the region overrun by blighted undead. Lordaeron Keep was deemed uninhabitable, and the efforts to reclaim the area faltered. The mighty Orc warrior, Varrock Saurfang, deeply disillusioned by Sylvanas' leadership, grew increasingly concerned that her actions were tearing the Horde apart. The burning of Teldrassil had appalled him. Captured during the battle for Lordaeron, Saurfang spent time in the Stormwind Stockade reflecting on the Horde's future. There, he confided in King Anduin Wrynn, revealing his plans to challenge Sylvanas for the mantle of Warchief and asking for the Alliance's aid in overthrowing her. A temporary truce was called between the Alliance and the Horde, and their combined forces marched on Orgrimmar to end Sylvanas' reign. However, before the battle began, Saurfang issued a personal challenge to Sylvanas, a Mak-Gorah, a duel of honour. Despite Thrall's warnings that he would likely die, Saurfang stood firm. As she armed herself, Saurfang was granted the Dragora by Thrall and Charlemagne by Anduin. After initially gaining the upper hand, Sylvanas was hurt and slashed across the eye. Sylvanas lashed out. With these words, she revealed her true disdain for the faction she had led. Unleashing a blast of devastating magic, Sylvanas struck down Saurfang, killing him instantly. She then abandoned the Horde entirely, leaving Orgrimmar and the faction she had once commanded in turmoil.
Standing as one. Savor it. Nothing lasts.
By the 35th year, Sylvanas Windrunner's story had diverged entirely from the Tirisfal Glades, marking the end of her direct involvement in its history. So, attention turned back to the Tirisfal Glades and the Forsaken, who began reclaiming the ruins of Lordaeron. With Brill successfully retaken and under reconstruction, influential Forsaken figures like Lillian Voss, Kalia Menethil, Deathstalker Commander Belmont, Dark Ranger Velenara, and Master Apothecary Faranal gathered to strategize the next steps in securing the region. Together, they established the new Desolate Council.
All right. What are we going to do about the plague in the Undercity?
The new Desolate Council would go on to figure out how to cleanse the city. And after a victory against a materialized manifestation of the plague, the ruins of Lordaeron were finally liberated from the lingering blight, allowing the Forsaken to reclaim their home and take a significant step towards securing the future.
Are we really going to trust a Menethil on the council?
I cannot escape the shadows of my past, but I have no desire for a throne. My place is here among you, and I vow to serve all our people.
I take you at your words, Lady Menethil. And we, the apothecaries, will help shape our brighter future.
Then it's settled. We are the Desolate Council. We are the Forsaken.
With the capital city finally cleansed after all these years, one might assume the history of the Tirisfal Glades had reached its conclusion. However, there's one more story to revisit. In the 40th year, as both the Horde and the Alliance embarked on their journeys to the Dragon Isles, the Tomb of Tyr saw significant developments once again. After the devastating loss of his order and the securing of the tomb's artifacts, Travad discovered that the structure had not completely collapsed. Resolving to stand vigil as the last of the Tyr's guard, he remained at the site for several years. However, over time, the tomb's defense systems inexplicably locked him out. So, a hero, accompanied by Watcher Coronos, ventured to the Tomb of Tyr in search of Tyr's preserved memories. There they encountered the frustrated Travad. Travad joined their mission, determined to assist them in reactivating the tomb's mechanisms. He hoped these systems would house enough of Tyr's memories to trigger the activation of the Silver Scale, an artifact essential to reconstructing Tyr's new body. Within the main chamber, Travad valiantly defended the group from the tomb's defense systems while guiding them deeper into the ruins. Their journey led to the Dark Walk, an underground, partially collapsed passage that connected the tomb's main chamber to the grave prison of Zakaj. When the first console short-circuited, Travad directed the hero to a secondary console. Using the Silver Scale, the hero activated it, unveiling Tyr's final stand against Zakaj the Corruptor. Witnessing Tyr's ultimate sacrifice reignited Travad's faith. And so, the story of the Tirisfal Glades comes full circle. A land forged in the ancient might of the Vrykul, shaped by the rise and fall of Lordaeron, and forever scarred by the defiance of the Forsaken. Okay, with the history of the Tirisfal Glades coming to an end, I think it's best we jump on a Zeppelin and head over to the Land of the Greats, our next stop on this world tour, the entire history of Durotar. Now, you could trace Durotar's history all the way back to another world entirely, to Draenor, to the Orcs' origins and their first steps onto Azeroth. But for this video, I think it's best to start at the point most players will recognise, the founding of the zone itself. We'll quickly go over what happened before the creation of Durotar. But if you want the full details of how the Orcs escaped from Draenor and settled on Azeroth, you can check out our dedicated video in the description below. In the year that we now denote as Year Zero, the Orcish Horde stormed through the Dark Portal and landed in the Eastern Kingdoms. Over the next few years, they fought relentless wars with the humans, sacking Stormwind, pushing through Khazmodan, and trying to conquer Lordaeron. But the might of the Alliance proved too strong. After 6 long years of war across the Eastern Kingdoms, the Orcs were driven back to the Dark Portal. Many fled back through it, and then were later chased down by the Sons of Lothar, another story we've recently covered. But some of the Orcs remained on Azeroth, a few disappeared into the wilds and went into hiding, but most of them were captured and imprisoned in the Alliance internment camps. In one of the biggest of those camps, a camp known as Durnhold, located in the southern reaches of Lordaeron, a young Orc orphan named Thrall was being raised as the personal slave of the camp's commander, Aedelus Blackmore. For the next 10 years, Thrall was trained to be a weapon for the humans, drilled in tactics, philosophy, combat, and forced to become a gladiator. 18 years after the Orcs arrived on Azeroth, Thrall finally escaped his internment camp. Believing that there was more for him beyond the camp walls, his journey eventually led him to the Frostwolf clan in the north, where he learned the truth of his heritage and claimed his place as their rightful leader. From there, Thrall began freeing the remaining Orcs still imprisoned across Azeroth, but while he was rallying his people, dark omens began to spread across Lordaeron. A strange plague was creeping through villages, and a mysterious prophet appeared to Thrall in visions. This prophet, known to Thrall as the Oracle, warned of a great darkness on the horizon and urged him to lead his people west to Kalimdor, with the only other option being one of staying in the Eastern Kingdoms, running from the Alliance for the rest of time. Thrall answered this strange call. He gathered what remained of the Orcs, seized a fleet of human ships, and set sail into the unknown in search of this Oracle. But the journey to Kalimdor didn't come without its challenges. Just off the coast of the mainland, Thrall and his Orcs were shipwrecked on the Darkspear Islands, where they encountered the Darkspear Trolls. After fighting alongside them against attacking Alliance forces, both groups were captured by Murlocs, serving the Sea Witch, Zarjira. Thrall and his Orcs eventually managed to escape, but the chieftain of the Darkspear Trolls, Sen'jin, was mortally wounded in the battle. With his dying breath, he asked Thrall to protect his people. Honouring this wish, the Darkspear swore loyalty to the Orcs and joined Thrall on his path to Kalimdor. When they finally made it to the mainland of Kalimdor, they were met by Cairn Bloodhoof and his Tauren. Thrall's forces helped Cairn push back the Centaur, a race of half-human, half-horse beasts who were attacking Tauren settlements. And in return, Cairn and the Tauren promised to guide the Orcs toward what they were looking for, the Oracle. But not all of the Orc clans followed this path so peacefully. The Warsong clan, under the command of Grommash Hellscream, were sent into Ashenvale to harvest lumber as punishment for attacking humans without Thrall's order. There, they clashed with the native Night Elves, and as the battles dragged on, a pit lord known as Manaroth from the invading Burning Legion saw an opportunity. He offered the Warsong his blood in exchange for loyalty, and those who accepted fell under demonic control. Eventually, the Orcs would find the Prophet, and at the urging of this mysterious oracle, who was now revealed to be Medivh, Thrall allied with one of the human leaders, Jaina Proudmoore, to put an end to this madness. Together, they captured Hellscream and freed him from Manaroth's corruption. Thrall then joined him in a final confrontation with the Pit Lord. It certainly wasn't easy, but Grom struck the killing blow on the demon. His sacrifice destroyed Manaroth and freed the Orcs from their demonic curse forever. Meanwhile, across Kalimdor, the Third War raged on. The Burning Legion continued to press on with its assault on Azeroth until its commander, Archimonde, was defeated at the Battle of Mount Hyjal. With his death, the Legion's invasion was broken, and the war finally came to an end. After Archimonde's defeat at Mount Hyjal, Azeroth's races were left fractured, reeling from the devastation of the Third War. But for the Orcs, the end of that war marked something far more important, a chance to start again. Thrall led his people south, looking for a home. They settled in the harsh, sun-scorched lands along Kalimdor's eastern coast. But this land wasn't empty, it was occupied by the native razor-mane quillboar, vicious, boar-like creatures with jagged spines and known for their ferocious tempers. But the quillboar weren't new enemies to the Orcs. They knew them well. They had fought the quillboar alongside the Tauren on their earlier journey to seek out the Oracle during the Third War. Thrall's warriors clashed with the Razormane once again, driving them back into the canyons and the cliffs. As the quillboar were absent across the plains and the deserts, the Orcs seized their chance to move in. Orcish camps grew into small villages, and a foothold was carved out of the unforgiving red earth. To Thrall, this was more than just survival. This was a new beginning. To honour the father he never truly knew, he named the land after him. Where they had settled became Durotar, in memory of Durotan. And with that name came a transformation. The Horde was no longer a demonic war machine, it was becoming something new. Orcs, Tauren, and Trolls all stood together under Thrall's new banner. In the north of this new region of Durotar, they began building more than just huts and palisades. They started to build a warrior city, a fortress to stand as the heart of their new horde, carved from stone and fire, raised with the help of goblin engineers, Tauren builders, Darkspear hunters, and even the Mok'Nathal champion Rexxar. Their city rose quickly. In tribute to the fallen warchief that had led the Horde through its early days on Azeroth, Thrall named their new city Orgrimmar, a fitting tribute to Orgrim Doomhammer. Now, we could wrap this story up here with a fairy tale style ending. The Horde had a new city, a harsh but promising land to call their own, and a growing nation with countless newcomers eager to join. But of course, stories in Azeroth are never that simple. What could possibly go wrong with a new beginning like this? The Alliance were on their way. After Lordaeron had been devastated by Arthas and his Scourge, a massive part of the Alliance fleet abandoned the continent and set sail into the unknown, hoping to find survivors. What they didn't realise was that the Alliance forces that had escaped and travelled to Kalimdor a few years earlier had certainly survived. Led by Jaina Proudmoore, the Alliance forces who remained on Kalimdor after the Third War had settled in the Dustwallow Marsh. On its eastern coast they built a stronghold, the port city of Theramore. Just down the coast from Durotar and the newly built warrior city of Orgrimmar, Theramore's position made the fragile truce between the Horde and the Alliance essential if both sides hoped for a future on Kalimdor. But that fragile peace was about to shatter. The Alliance fleet were on their way, and leading the charge was Jaina's father, Grand Admiral Daelin Proudmoore. A celebrated hero of the Second War, Daelin was one of the Horde's fiercest enemies on the seas, and he was scarred by what the Horde had done to the Eastern Kingdoms. To him, the Horde would always be monsters, and his arrival would threaten the entire balance of Kalimdor. When Daelin's fleet reached Kalimdor's shores, Jaina met him in Theramore, where she was accompanied by Rexxar. She pleaded with her father, telling him that the Horde were no longer their enemies. But Daelin refused to listen. He could not accept that the Horde had changed. Instead, he ordered their capture, and fighting soon broke out on the streets of Theramore. Rexxar managed to escape and fled back to Durotar, carrying word of the Alliance threat to Vol'jin and Thrall. With the peace between the two factions now shattered, Thrall wasted no time. They would meet this threat head-on and marched towards Theramore Isle. Yet before the attack began, Thrall confronted Jaina herself, giving her a difficult and final choice. Stand with her father and reignite the war between the two factions, or stand with the Horde and preserve the peace on Kalimdor. And as the story goes, Jaina chose the peace. The Horde would storm Theramore Isle, Orcs, Trolls and Tauren all fighting side by side, and together they brought down the Grand Admiral Daelin Proudmoore. After the death of Admiral Proudmoore, the battle had ended and the Horde withdrew peacefully, returning to Durotar to continue building their nation. But as we know, peace never lasts for long in Azeroth, and soon another threat would rise to challenge the Horde's new home. Most Horde members who've travelled through Durotar will recognise Thunder Ridge. Not long after Durotar was founded, Rexxar and his companions were sent to Thunder Ridge to collect Shimmerweed, but when they arrived, something was clearly wrong. The thunder lizards that lived there were acting strangely, being aggressive and almost deranged. It didn't take long to uncover the cause. Humans had set up a lumber operation nearby, tearing through the forest and driving the lizards into madness. With no other choice, the Orcs were forced to put the creatures down to prevent further chaos. But the source of this problem wasn't actually the human logging camp, it was coming from somewhere else entirely. The rest of the trees hadn't been cut down, they were burned and corrupted by demonic magic. The source of this wasn't the humans, but a group of Orcs themselves. The Burning Blade clan, once feared across the Eastern Kingdoms and known to the humans as the Flaming Sword, they were renowned for their deadly blade masters and fought in the First and Second Wars as part of the Old Horde. But when the Horde fell and Thrall rose to power, many Burning Blade warriors broke free from demonic influence and then pledged themselves to the new Horde. But not all of them walked this peaceful path. A faction of the corrupted Burning Blade remained loyal to the Burning Legion. Sometime after the Third War, a lesser demon named Zmodlor, a master of deception and infiltration, remained on Azeroth and began rebuilding this cult in secret. He preyed on hatred, recruiting Orcs and humans alike, convincing each side that he could help them wipe out each other. Zmodlor's plot nearly succeeded. Aegwynn, the former guardian of Tirisfal, and Lady Jaina Proudmoore confronted him and his followers at Dreadmist Peak in the Barrens. The two managed to banish Zmodlor and end his twisted plan before it could ignite another bloodbath. In the 25th year, many young Orcs and Trolls began their journey through Azeroth, and it all started in the Valley of Trials. It was here that they were faced with their first real tests, confronting threats spreading across Durotar. These trials served to aid the Horde, but also to prove they were ready to face the challenges of Azeroth and whatever lay beyond it. They were ordered to cull the local boar population, slay venomous scorpids, and eliminate prowling fellstalkers, lesser demons that had recently begun emerging from caves in the cliffs to the north. Those caves, once a quiet network of natural tunnels, had become corrupted by the presence of the Burning Blade. Though the demons there were weak, their growing numbers were beginning to spill into the valley, raising concerns that the Shadow Council was gaining influence in the region. The Shadow Council being a group of mortal warlocks that still serve the Burning Legion. Among the wildlife here, a particularly troublesome scorpid named Sarkoth had earned a reputation for attacking careless initiates, and more Orcs and Trolls were sent to deal with it. Despite the dangers, the valley also remained a place of labour, with Orcish peons gathering lumber from the few trees scattered across the harsh landscape. By the 25th year, records show that Orgrimmar, the Horde's capital, housed around 14,000 inhabitants, and across all of Durotar, the population reached approximately 21,000. With over 85% of Durotar's population made up of Orcs and Trolls, the numbers tell a clear story, a story of the deep bond between the two races. And that bond only grew stronger following a painful betrayal by Hexmaster Zalazane, a powerful witch doctor of the Darkspear tribe and once the chieftain, Vol'jin's, closest friend. Corrupted by dark voodoo and haunted by visions from the lower, Zalazane turned on his own people. As the Darkspear settled on the Echo Isles during their exodus to Kalimdor, Zalazane's mind broke under the weight of his own power. He used twisted magic to strip his kin of their free will, enslaving them to his own command. As his control over the Isles spread, the number of free Darkspear Trolls began to vanish. Fearing the complete loss of his people, Vol'jin made a difficult choice. He ordered the Darkspear tribe to abandon their new home. Seeking safety, the Darkspear fled to the coast of Durotar. There, the Orcs welcomed them in as brothers-in-arms, of course, granting them land of their own to build their fishing village of Sen'jin, giving the Trolls a fresh start again. The Darkspear Trolls, alongside their Horde allies, launched frequent attacks against Zalazane's stronghold on the Echo Isles. Many brave Trolls and Horde champions had journeyed to the Echo Isles to try and defeat him, and more than a few returned claiming victory. even presenting what they believed was Zalazane's severed head. But it was an illusion. Days later, this head would be revealed as nothing more than painted rocks, a bundle of coconuts, or worse, the head of an unfortunate Darkspear slave. Zalazane was still alive, ruling over the Echo Isles, but the Trolls and the Orcs of Durotar would need to prioritise their forces elsewhere. Zalazane wasn't the only one trying to unravel the fragile peace of Durotar during this time. The next threat to the Horde's new way of life didn't come from across the sea, or even from the outside of their borders. It came from within Orgrimmar itself, or more specifically, from beneath it. The city had been built over a fiery network of tunnels the Horde named Ragefire Chasm. At first, these lava-filled caverns seemed harmless, far below the streets of the capital. But that changed when the enemies of the Horde began using them as a refuge. A group of Trogs had burrowed their way into the chasm, slowly gathering strength and preparing to strike from below. And worse still, a splinter sect of the Shadow Council made their home there as well. This group, known as the Searing Blade, was the sister faction to the infamous Burning Blade. Backed by the Shadow Council, they were determined to undermine Thrall's new horde and bring it down from within. The Searing Blade was led by three dark figures: Taragaman the Hungerer, a Felguard who was left on Kalimdor after the Third War; Jurgosh the Invoker, a powerful Orc warlock who had pledged himself to the Shadow Council; and Bazilan, a satyr consumed by corruption. From the Ragefire Chasm they plotted the downfall of everything the Horde had built, but Thrall was not blind to the threat. He left its destruction to the rising adventurers of Azeroth. When the champions of the Horde were strong enough, they descended into the chasm, struck down the Trogs and the Searing Blade, and they returned to the streets of Orgrimmar, victorious. For the time being, the threat within the Ragefire Chasm was over. The history of World of Warcraft really accelerates between the 25th and the 27th year, as both the Horde and the Alliance face two monumental events: the invasion of Outland and the war against the Lich King in Northrend. When the war in the north finally ended and the Trolls returned home to their camp in Durotar, the Darkspear tribe prepared for a new battle, one of their own making. They launched a campaign to reclaim their homeland, the Echo Isles. The Darkspear fought their way through waves of hexed trolls, inching closer to the heart of the Isles where Zalazane awaited them, summoning foul magic and raising a powerful barrier to shield himself. Cornered but still defiant, Zalazane boasted that no living being could break through his shield and that he was untouchable. But then came the laughter.
Zalazane.
The mocking voice of Bwan Samdi, the Lower of the Dead, echoed across the Isles. Furious that Zalazane had dared to meddle in his domain, Bwan Samdi shattered the shield and unleashed his wrath.
You think you got what it takes to face me?
Destroying the Hexmaster from within. And with that, Zalazane's dark reign over the Echo Isles came to a violent but final end. But even after reclaiming their homeland, the Darkspear Trolls still faced lingering threats across the Echo Isles, from crazed raptors and violent Naga that continued to challenge their hold over the land. In the 28th year, everything changed. Azeroth's surface was shattered by the elemental chaos and the explosive return of Deathwing, the Destroyer. And unfortunately for the Orcs, Durotar didn't escape the destruction. The geography of Durotar was reshaped almost instantly. Flooding from the mighty South Fury River, one of the most prominent rivers in Kalimdor, spilled across the land during the Cataclysm. Nearly a quarter of the region transformed from dry desert into wetland, and the newly flooded area became known as the South Fury Watershed. The sudden change wiped out local wildlife, including the thunder lizards that once roamed there, and Orgrimmar, the heart of the Horde, didn't escape unscathed either. Large sections of the city were burned during the elemental unrest, and while many saw ruin and despair, one Orc saw opportunity. During the events of the Cataclysm, Warchief Thrall had stepped down so he could focus on healing the world, but by doing so, he left leadership of the Horde in the hands of Garrosh Hellscream. Garrosh didn't see this damage as a threat to Orgrimmar. He saw it as a chance to reshape the Horde's capital into something new, not just a warrior city, but a mighty fortress. He ordered Orgrimmar and Durotar to be reinforced with iron battlements, barricades and training grounds, and this idea turned out to be the right move, because Orgrimmar was about to be tested. The uneasy peace with the Alliance was crumbling, and the shadow of war was once again falling over Durotar. With the Cataclysm behind them and Deathwing defeated, War Chief Garrosh Hellscream revealed his next move to drive the Alliance out of Kalimdor entirely and claim the continent for the Horde. His first step was to attack Theramore, the Alliance's strongest military outpost on the continent. Garrosh launched a bold campaign to cut off Kalimdor's coastline, using the Horde's fleet to block sea access. Then, in a devastating show of force, he destroyed Theramore Isle. The Alliance fleet, hearing this news, struck back swiftly, and a massive naval battle broke out in Bladefist Bay, the small port just outside of Orgrimmar. But Garrosh's war wasn't only against the Alliance here. His brutality and hunger for control began to tear the Horde apart from within. He branded the entire Darkspear tribe as traitors. He sent his personal bodyguards, an elite fighting force of the Horde known as the Korkron, to the Echo Isles, placing the trolls there under martial law to prevent uprising. This crackdown disrupted a quiet plan that was being worked on behind the scenes by Vol'jin and Lorthamar Theron. They were trying to coordinate an effort to challenge Garrosh's rule. Before this kind of mutiny could amount to anything, an attempt was made on Vol'jin's life. He had been sent to the Krasarang wilds of Pandaria with Korkron forces to investigate the Sorok. The Sorok are feral, lizard-like humanoids, with the sole purpose of just causing trouble, and they were slowing the Horde's progress in Pandaria. But this investigative mission was nothing more than a setup. The Orcs had planned to assassinate the Darkspear leader. The attempt on Vol'jin's life failed, and though he was badly wounded, he managed to escape. With his people under threat and Lorthamar still occupied on the Isle of Thunder in Pandaria, Vol'jin was forced to act himself. He returned to Durotar and openly declared rebellion. And so, the period known as the Darkspear Rebellion had begun. It started with the liberation of the Echo Isles and pushed all the way through to Razor Hill. Vol'jin's forces gained momentum, and soon they were joined by Thrall, Bane Bloodhoof and Chen Stormstout, each of them not willing to let Garrosh twist the Horde into a tool of tyranny. The Darkspear Rebellion pushed Garrosh and his so-called True Horde back to the gates of Orgrimmar, but they weren't the only ones closing in. The Alliance had also joined the hunt. With both factions now bearing down on the city, the siege of Orgrimmar was about to begin. As the Darkspear Rebellion weakened the True Horde from within, the Alliance planned a surprise attack on Bladefist Bay. Meanwhile, Vol'jin and Bane Bloodhoof gained control over most of Durotar and the Barrens. Vol'jin also sent an elite squadron of Goblin Special Forces known as the Gob Squad to investigate disappearances across Durotar. Their search led them to Ragefire Chasm, where they uncovered Garrosh's dark plans. He was breeding proto-drakes, hoarding weapons, and delving into twisted shamanism. Garrosh was prepared well. He reinforced Orgrimmar with the Dragonmaw clan, Korkron elite forces, and the Black Fuse Company's war machines. And he also secured an alliance with the Klaxi, the manted paragons from Pandaria. After discovering the Vault of Yar-Sharaj on Pandaria, Garrosh travelled to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, where he battled the leader of the Shadowpan, Taranzu, and used the corrupted waters to awaken the heart of Yar-Sharaj, an ancient old god relic that can be used as the ultimate weapon. If you would like to find out all the details of the events across Pandaria, including the ones of the Siege of Orgrimmar, you can check out our video on the full lore explanation of the entire expansion down in the description below. Inside the city, United Forces freed prisoners and fought Garrosh's Dark Shamans. After a long drawn-out battle, the champions of Azeroth confronted Garrosh himself in his sanctum, called the Underhold. Still alive, Garrosh was then taken into custody. As the leaders of the Alliance and the Horde gathered in Grommash Hold, Thrall prepared to execute Garrosh, but leader of the Alliance, Varian Rin, intervened. He insisted that Garrosh should stand trial, and Taranzu offered to bring him to Pandaria. Varian declared that while the Horde had committed grave crimes, he would give them one more chance, so long as they upheld their honour. And with that, the siege of Orgrimmar had ended, but peace between the two factions was uncertain. The civil war against Garrosh had already shown one undeniable truth. The city of Orgrimmar was not as impenetrable as they thought, and it could be breached. That lesson would stay in the back of the mind of some of the Horde, and under High Overlord Varrock Saurfang, who had stepped into military leadership after Garrosh's fall, a great effort was spent reinforcing the city's defences. Towers were rebuilt, walls were strengthened, and watchful eyes stood guard over every gate. And Sylvanas Windrunner grew confident. As the new war chief, Sylvanas had bigger plans that went far beyond simple defence. She managed to spin a web of deception across Azeroth, planting the idea that the Horde were preparing to seize Silithus. Tyrande Whisperwind took the bait. Determined to protect Kalimdor, she mobilised nearly the entire Night Elf military and marched them south towards Silithus. But that was never the real plan. By pulling the Night Elves away from their sacred homeland, Sylvanas had left Teldrassil exposed, and the Horde attacked. Not at Silithus though, but at the World Tree itself. Flames consumed it, and before the Alliance could react, Teldrassil was burnt to ash. Shocked by this brutal act, the Alliance had to retaliate, and their response was swift and brutal, striking directly in the Eastern Kingdoms. Their target was the Undercity, and though Sylvanas fought to hold it, the city was ultimately destroyed. And with these events, the Fourth War on Azeroth had started. During this war, Orgrimmar had become the beating heart of the Horde's war machine. Yet as the war dragged on, cracks within the Horde started to show. A bit like what Garrosh had done, Sylvanas tightened her grip on the city, silencing dissent whenever it appeared. Orgrimmar, once rebuilt as a fortress to protect its people, was now starting to feel like a prison. The growing unrest in the streets could not be contained, and soon the Horde found itself on the brink of another civil war. On the one side stood Sylvanas and her loyalists, determined to rule with fear and strength. On the other side were the rebels, who dreamed of a Horde that was closer to Thrall's vision, a Horde built on honour, not tyranny. And this unrest would develop into a face-off, moments away from civil war. The Thanos Blightcaller rallied the people in Sylvanas' name, holding Orgrimmar firmly in her grasp. And Varrock Saurfang outside the city gathered the rebels, joined by the Alliance, and were marching from Razor Hill. The final confrontation between the two was looming, and at any moment a battle that would decide the future of the Horde could break out. But it never came to that. Before the armies clashed, Saurfang chose to face Sylvanas himself. He challenged her to a Mak-Gorar, the ancient Orcish duel of honour. The fight was swift, and Saurfang fell, but not before exposing Sylvanas' true intentions for all to see. She abandoned the Horde, leaving even her most loyal followers behind. In her absence, the Horde began to heal. Sylvanas' loyalists surrendered or were rounded up, and Saurfang's funeral was held in the front of Grommash Hold. A moment of unity as Horde leaders and even a few Alliance figures came together to pay their respects. We won't go into the fine details of the Fourth War and the battle for Azeroth, but with the war against the Alliance now at bay and the Old God N'Zoth defeated, the leaders of the Horde gathered in the Orgrimmar embassy. This time, they didn't choose to elect a single war chief. Instead, they formed the Horde Council, a body made up of voices from every race, guiding their people not through one leader, but through many leaders. From a barren wasteland to the thriving heart of the Horde, Durotar is more than just a starting zone in World of Warcraft. It's the embodiment of the Orcs' journey, forged from exile, scarred by war, and built on sacrifice. Every canyon and outpost in Durotar tells a story. Through the rise and fall of war chiefs, internal rebellions, burning skies, and fractured alliances, one thing has remained constant in this area: the Orcs and their determination to survive in a world that was never kind to them. With the history of Durotar drawing to a close, it's safe to say that there would be no Orgrimmar or Durotar without the Tauren. So let's ride across the Great Plains of Kalimdor to our final stop on this Supercut World Tour. Let's have a look at the entire history of Mulgore. Situated in the heart of central Kalimdor, Mulgore's lush green plains serve as the ancestral homeland of the Honourable Tauren. Surrounded by the towering Stone Talon Mountains to the north, this landlocked territory shares borders with several prominent regions in Azeroth, including Desolus, Feralus, Dustwallow Marsh, and the Barrens. A striking feature of this picturesque terrain are the lofty cliffs of Thunderbluff, looming majestically over the surrounding fields at the very heart of the zone. Mulgore stands as a serene haven, cradled within a tranquil valley, embraced by towering mountains on every side. However, beneath its exterior lie tales of turmoil and strife, narratives that we shall delve into in this very tale. The tale of Mulgore reaches back to a distant past, preceding the cataclysmic events of the Great Sundering, when the Night Elves held dominion over the ancient lands of Kalimdor. These elves, devout followers of the Lord of the Forest, a revered druidic demigod named Cenarius. While the exact origins of this demigod remain veiled in mystery, his legendary stature demands acknowledgement in our narrative today. In the intricate lore of ancient Tauren mythology, it is believed that the Earth Mother, an ethereal and immortal entity of profound significance, bestowed upon the ancestors of the Tauren the gift of hunting prowess. Among their prey was Aparo, the elusive white stag, known also as the ancient guardian Malorn. Driven by their pursuit, the Tauren ancestors relentlessly hunted Malorn across the expanse of Azeroth until the stag sought refuge in the heavens, where his majestic antlers became entwined among the stars. Legend holds that the moon goddess Elune took notice of the stag, and upon aiding him, she found herself captivated by his presence. Their union resulted in the birth of a demigod, Cenarius. Though Cenarius was born of Elune, she entrusted him to Malorn, recognizing that he belonged to the mortal realm. Thus, Cenarius, a being of both sky and earth, came into the care of the stag. His emergence reverberated through the Emerald Dream, prompting the green dragon aspect, Ysera, to take him under her wing, guiding him through the verdant splendor of Azeroth's wilds. Cenarius, imbued with a profound connection to the natural world and its creatures, devoted his life to safeguarding the balance of nature and nurturing the lands he called home. Among the creatures that thrived in the plains of central Kalimdor under Cenarius' watchful gaze were the Yorngal, beings who shared in the abundance of the land alongside their guardian and mentor. Between 12,200 and 12,000 years prior to the opening of the Dark Portal, the robust Yorngal race inhabited central Kalimdor. However, discontent brewed among the Yorngal as they found themselves forced to share their hunting grounds with neighbouring trolls. Against Cenarius' counsel, they embarked southward in pursuit of unclaimed territory, eventually encountering the borders of the formidable Mogu Empire. Under the rule of the merciless Mogu Emperor, Xiang, the Yorngal, was subjected to enhancements by flesh shapers, augmenting their strength, ferocity, and intellect. The vastness of the Mogu Empire's history warrants its own extensive recounting, but the Yorngal endured generations of oppression until they joined a collective revolt and contributed to the Empire's downfall. Upon regaining their freedom, the Yorngal found themselves adrift, their cultural heritage eroded by Mogu decrees prohibiting the preservation of oral traditions. Some of them clung on to the fragmented tales of Cenarius' benevolence, while others sought to forge a new path by sheer force of will. Amidst these divisions, many Yorngal migrated northward, while others opted to remain in their adopted lands. A third faction returned to central Kalimdor, where they were reunited with Cenarius. Those who chose to study under Cenarius embraced the teachings of druidic magic, attuning themselves to the rhythms of the natural world. Conversely, others delved into the mastery of shamanism. The arcane energies emanating from the Well of Eternity catalyzed a transformation among these central Yorngal, birthing a new lineage of bovine creatures known as the Tauren. Over time, these Tauren splintered into various tribes and dispersed across the lands. It wasn't until the dragon mage Corielstras persuaded the High Mountain Tauren to align themselves with the Night Elves and other races in the fight against the Burning Legion during the War of the Ancients. The Tauren proved invaluable allies during this pivotal conflict. Following the conclusion of the War of the Ancients and the cataclysmic events of the Great Sundering, which shattered the supercontinent of Kalimdor, 80% of its landmass was submerged beneath the vast sea, isolating certain Tauren tribes from one another. In the aftermath of this upheaval, surviving Tauren continued their tranquil existence within the central regions of the now fragmented and diminished continent of Kalimdor. Legend has it that the Tauren roamed the forest and the plains of Kalimdor, living in symbiosis with nature for thousands of years, one such peaceful expanse being the plains we know today as Mulgore. For years, the Tauren dwelled in tranquility upon the sprawling plains of Kalimdor, up until a formidable adversary emerged from the neighbouring lands. Among these neighbouring territories lay one particularly revered region, the lush grasslands of Masha-an-Shi, known in our language as the Loom of the Earth Mother. Drawn by subtle elemental murmurs, the Tauren came to believe that beneath these meadows slumbered the Earth Mother herself. After decades of endeavouring to awaken her, Tauren shamans finally succeeded, only to realise with horror that their efforts had roused not the benevolent Earth Mother, but the colossal Earth Elemental, Princess Theridrus, daughter of Therizane, the Stone Mother. Utilising the verdant surroundings for sustenance, Theridrus absorbed energy from the life across the lands to replenish her weakened form. Thus, the once fertile and sacred land of Masha-an-Shi was transformed and renamed to Desolus. The catastrophic loss of life reverberated throughout Azeroth and even into the Emerald Dream. Zeta, son of the Forest Lord Cenarius, journeyed to Desolus to investigate. However, instead of imprisoning Theridrus as planned, Zeta fell in love with her. Their union gave birth to the Centaur, resulting in a tragic cycle of conflict. After slaying their own father, the Centaur multiplied rapidly, driving the native Tauren from Desolus and sparking a prolonged period of darkness and strife for the Tauren race. Despite this, continuing on with their nomadic settlements across the lands, the lives of the Tauren shifted with the seasons, yet they remained united by a common hostility toward the marauding Centaur. Despite enduring relentless attacks, the Tauren stayed true and they despised war, but they did meet aggression with resilience. Each year brought either a year of peace or a year of conflict, and the Tauren embraced this cyclical existence as the only life they knew. For the Tauren, this way of life persisted until the era of the Third War. While conflicts ravaged the Eastern Kingdoms, the tranquil plains of Kalimdor shielded the Tauren from the turmoil. However, their isolation ended with the arrival of the Horde upon Kalimdor's shores during the Third War, thrusting the Tauren into the modern way of life that we are all used to today. Our narrative now shifts to one of the most revered leaders among the Tauren, Cairn Bloodhoof. As chieftain of the Bloodhoof tribe, Cairn epitomized strength and leadership. Despite the weight of age slowing his stride, Cairn remained resolute in his commitment to safeguard his ancient people from the relentless Centaur threat. He harboured a steadfast hope of leading his tribe to a new homeland where they could thrive in peace. Cairn's outlook shifted when he encountered Thrall, the young war chief of the emerging Orcish horde. Witnessing Thrall's valour in battle against the Centaurs, Cairn was intrigued by the horde's blend of nobility and ferocity. Thrall's quest for destiny resonated deeply with Cairn, prompting him to guide the horde northward, helping them with their quest of finding an oracle. In exchange for revealing the oracle's location, Thrall pledged to safeguard the Tauren caravan's journey to the tranquil plains of Mulgore. Together, crossing the land, they successfully evaded and defeated the attacking centaurs, reaching the safety of Mulgore. Cairn then directed Thrall to the oracle's location within Stone Talon Peak before they parted ways. This encounter marked a pivotal moment in the Third War, leading Thrall and the Horde to meet the Guardian Medivh in the Stone Talon Mountain caverns was a turning point, signalling the beginning of the conflict's end. If you want to find out more about the story from the Stone Talon Mountains, you can refer to our dedicated tale on the peaks via the safe portal provided in the description below. After centuries without a homeland, the Tauren finally had a territory to call their own. Atop the windswept mesa of Thunderbluff, Cairn built a sanctuary for his people, welcoming Tauren from all tribes. Cairn's son Bane accompanied his father and the Tauren when they settled in Mulgore. As time passed, the disparate Tauren factions rallied under Cairn's leadership. While some tribes still held differing views on the nation's trajectory, most of them acknowledged Cairn as their wisest and most capable guide towards shared future. But this newfound era of peace and tranquility did face its fair share of challenges. Cairn acknowledged that the nomadic customs ingrained in Tauren society actually posed a threat to their survival. With their numbers relatively small and their wandering way of life, they remained susceptible to assaults from the Centaur, Quillboar, and various other races. His visions would come true when a band of Centaur, led by Kirag, attacked the Tauren village, capturing his son Bane and imprisoning him in their encampment. This event plunged Cairn into a state of despair, rendering him unable to lead and leaving the Tauren vulnerable for further attacks by the Centaur. When Rexxar, one of the Horde's esteemed champions, and his companions arrived in Mulgore seeking Cairn's aid against the invading Kultirans, Cairn expressed his inability to assist, citing that his spirit had been broken. It was then that Cairn's faithful second-in-command, Tagar Bloodhoof, urged Rexxar to seek out Boven Wind Totem and his outcasts to help locate Bane. With the assistance of the outcasts, Rexxar located Kirag's camp, eliminated the Centaur threat, rescued Bane, and returned him to his father's embrace in Thunderbluff. Cairn's joy knew no bounds, as he thanked Rexxar for breathing new life into him and pledged his forces to join the battle against the Kultirans. Sometime later, in the 25th year after the opening of the Dark Portal, the peaceful settlement that Cairn had provided for the Tauren race began to lead to an increase in the Tauren population across the region, with thousands of young Taurens starting their journey in Mulgore. Though the noble Tauren were peaceful in nature, the rites of the Great Hunt were venerated as the heart of their spiritual culture. Every Tauren, warrior or otherwise, sought identity both as a hunter and as a child of the Earth Mother. Tauren who reached the age of maturity travelled to Camp Narash, where Chief Hawkwind would send the new adventurers on quests to test their skills and prove themselves in the wilds of the Red Cloud Mesa, the name for the rolling plains atop the high cliffs in southern Mulgore. This newfound lease of life resulted in the expansion of the settlement of Thunderbluff into the grand city many Horde adventurers had seen with their own eyes. The Tauren had established the city as the centre for trade caravans, travelling artisans, and inventors of every kind. The proud city also stood as a refuge for the many hunters who stalked their dangerous prey through the barrens and its surrounding areas. Long bridges of wood and rope spanned the chasms between the mesas, and each mesa topped with tents, longhouses, carefully painted totems, and spirit lodges. The mighty chief Cairn Bloodhoof presided over the bustling city, ensuring that the united Tauren tribes lived in peace and security. This period of tranquility and safety was soon disrupted by the arrival of the small green troublemakers, the Goblins. Several years after establishing themselves in Kalimdor, the Goblins expanded their control over the region. Some Goblins came together to create the Venture Company, a formidable Goblin-run cartel notorious for exploiting Azeroth's natural resources. Affiliated with the Trade Coalition, this company extends its operations to various corners of Azeroth. On Kalimdor, they are active in regions like the Stone Talon Mountains, the Barrens, and notably of course, Mulgore. The Goblins demonstrated remarkable skill in logging, with Mulgore drawing particular interest to them due to its numerous water wells. They swiftly took control of 3 wells in the region: the Thunderhorn Water Well, the Wildmane Water Well, and the Winterhoof Water Well. This sparked outrage among the Tauren upon discovering that their sacred water sources were being exploited by the Goblin menace. Responding swiftly, Tauren forces were dispatched to confront the Goblins, whose size disadvantage led to their quick retreat from the area. The Venture Company Goblins were not the sole outsiders drawn to the tranquil plains of Mulgore. A scouting contingent of Gallic Centaur were also spotted roaming the area. This came as a surprise, as the Gallic Centaur were not native to Mulgore but hailed from the Thousand Needles instead. Alongside the Goblins and the Tauren's sworn enemies, the Centaur, an unlikely group of individuals also sought to benefit from Mulgore's resources. The Dwarves of Baal Modan, situated in the southern reaches of the Barrens, also took an interest in Mulgore. These dwarves were in central Kalimdor, excavating an ancient Titan complex and research facility beneath Baal Modan. It is likely that numerous relics and much knowledge lie deep beneath the surface. In a bid for expansion, these dwarves dispatched small contingents to the neighbouring region of Mulgore, establishing the Baaldun dig site to unearth the area's secrets as part of their lifelong quest for historical knowledge. Just as they confronted the Venture Company Goblins, the Tauren faced the challenge posed by these new invaders. Viewing it as a disrespect to the Earth Mother, Bane warned the dwarves that they were disturbing the Earth spirits in the lands of Mulgore. The dwarves did not listen to this warning. The Bloodhoof tribe spearheaded efforts to expel these intruders, resorting to confiscating and destroying their pickaxes when diplomatic negotiations faltered. Concurrently, the Tauren coordinated with Horde operatives to engage with the Harpies, Quillboar, and Gnolls also inhabiting the Red Cloud Mesa. Despite their utmost respect for the Earth Mother and the lands they lived off, the Tauren tribes often feuded and warred among themselves, vying for control of the united Tauren tribes. The most significant feud arose between the Bloodhoof tribe and the Grim Totem tribe, spearheaded by the Grim Totem matriarch, Magartha Grim Totem. The elder crone and the matriarch of the once mighty Grim Totem tribe was a powerful shaman and cunning leader. She emerged as the chief rival to High Chieftain Cairn Bloodhoof for the leadership for all Tauren. Unable to oust Cairn through political means, Magartha resorted to treachery. The Grim Totems believed that Magartha would lead them in eradicating the lesser races from Kalimdor and the reclamation of the ancestral Tauren lands. Constantly disagreeing with Cairn's leadership and the direction of the Tauren's future, Magartha felt that she was the only one fit to rule her people. In a tale that has been recounted elsewhere, Rhaegar Earthfury was a successful gladiator slave master who owned Logosh, known to us as the Lost King of Stormwind, Varian Rin, during his bout of amnesia. Logosh fought in gladiator tournaments alongside Valeria Sanguinar and Broll Baremantle. The amnesiac human eventually led Rhaegar's team to victory in a Crimson Ring tournament at Dire Maul, earning Rhaegar a substantial fortune in gambling winnings. Following the tournament, Rhaegar took his team to Thunderbluff to find a Tauren gladiator to replace Valeria Sanguinar, whom he had sold to another gladiator master. On their journey, the human, dubbed Logosh by spectators at Dire Maul, a name which had stuck, and his teammate, Broll Baremantle, requested to visit the Pools of Vision in Thunderbluff. They hoped to find answers through a ritual there. Logosh sought to recover his lost memories, while Broll hoped to communicate with the spirit of his deceased daughter. Rhaegar granted their request, and as they set off for the Pools of Vision, he went to visit his friend, Archdruid Hamul Runetotem. Magartha approached Rhaegar, suggesting several young Tauren who would be strong candidates for his battle training, including her own granddaughter and several grandnephews. While Rhaegar considered this proposal, Broll and Logosh went to bathe in the pools. It was here they were attacked by a large cave elemental summoned by Magartha, but Logosh emerged victorious, and the pools helped him recall some of his lost memories. In an attempt to discredit Cairn, who had been hesitant to disturb the elemental without understanding its motives, Magartha praised Rhaegar's champions for achieving what the great Cairn could not. Many years later, after the conflict with the Lich King, Thrall relinquished his position as war chief of the Horde, and Garrosh Hellscream succeeded him. Hellscream had been accused of orchestrating the murder of innocent druids, a deed actually carried out by orcs loyal to the nihilistic Twilight's Hammer sect. Enraged by these killings, Cairn challenged Garrosh for leadership, and with the aid of Magartha Grimtotem's manipulations, Garrosh emerged victorious, resulting in Cairn's demise. Following Cairn's death, Magartha orchestrated the infiltration of Bloodhoof village and seized control of Thunderbluff for the Grimtotem tribe. The Grimtotem tribe's assassins infiltrated Thunderbluff, targeting skilled weapon masters, powerful druids, and shamans. Their assault focused on the Spirit Rise, where members of the Skychaser clan were ruthlessly slaughtered. With the support of the Forsaken below, who aligned with the Grimtotem tribe, the attackers also targeted the Hunters on the Hunter's Rise and other individuals capable of wielding arms. By doing so, they instilled fear among the remaining Tauren. However, the Grimtotem's reign was short-lived. Through the combined efforts of Jevon Grimtotem and Jaina Proudmoore, Bane rallied an army and acquired the necessary weaponry to confront the Grimtotem within Thunderbluff. In a decisive counterattack orchestrated by Bane, utilizing a fleet of zeppelins to strategically divide Magartha's forces, Thunderbluff was retaken, and Bane assumed his rightful position as chieftain of the Tauren. With stability restored, Thunderbluff once again stands as a beacon of peace and security for Kalimdor's Tauren. Magartha and her followers were exiled, banished across the land, while Jevon, now leader of the remaining Grimtotem who did not partake in this attack, pledged the tribe's allegiance to the Horde, and they were allowed to continue to reside within Thunderbluff. After inheriting his father's former role, the true heir to the Tauren throne, Bane Bloodhoof, resumed his peaceful reign. Shortly prior to the events of the Cataclysm, the Bilgewater goblins aligned themselves with the Horde's forces throughout Azeroth. Following Bane's assumption of the role of the High Chieftain of the Tauren, his already frosty relationship with War Chief Garrosh Hellscream deteriorated further. Despite Cairn Bloodhoof's death at Garrosh's hands, Bane had opted not to seek revenge, prioritizing a unified leadership within the Horde. Understanding the need for a strong leader to ensure the Horde's survival, Bane believed Garrosh could provide inspiration to his people. However, tensions rose as Garrosh began making increasing demands on the Tauren people. One such demand was access to Mulgore's untainted sacred water supplies, as the Horde's new goblin allies had polluted much of the water near Orgrimmar with their industrial activities in Azara. Bane was hesitant to grant Garrosh's request, and Archdruid Hamul Runetotem was even more opposed. After a contentious discussion, Bane reluctantly agreed to the demand on the condition that a Tauren representative would oversee the goblins' operations going forward. After the resurgence of Deathwing the Destroyer and the ensuing cataclysm, tensions between the Alliance and the Horde heightened, particularly in the southern central regions of Kalimdor. In a bid to bolster their offensive against the Horde, the Alliance launched an assault on a Tauren encampment in the southern barrens known as Camp Terayo. The attack originated from Northwatch Hold, spurred by false intelligence suggesting an impending Tauren assault. The resulting destruction, termed a massacre by the Tauren, occurred after the Alliance ensured the evacuation of civilians under the command of General Hawthorne. Despite efforts to minimize casualties, some individuals perished while attempting to flee. Bane Bloodhoof acknowledged the camp as a legitimate military target and commended Hawthorne's decision to spare civilians. Nevertheless, dissent within the Alliance High Command arose, with some advocating for more aggressive tactics such as hostage-taking. Subsequently, the camp was subjected to firebombing by Wildhammer Griffin Rider mercenaries, leading to its destruction. Alliance forces seized weaponry and dismantled smithing facilities, dealing a significant blow to their adversaries and disrupting the Horde operations. The Tauren military refrained from retaliation until assurances were made for the safety and the evacuation of civilians from the camp. Survivors, along with refugees from Honor's Stand, sought sanctuary at Camp Unify in the Overgrowth. However, the evacuation was fraught with peril as many fell to the hostile bristleback Quillboar. Following the Alliance attack, the route from the Barrens to Mulgore was barricaded by the Tauren. They constructed the Great Gate to ward off potential Alliance incursions into their peaceful territory. Although the Great Gate faced attacks from Alliance siege engines and soldiers, it was successfully defended by the combined forces of Orcs and Tauren stationed at Vendetta Point. In the aftermath of the Cataclysm, the dwarves of Baeldun Digsite met their demise at the hands of agitated earth spirits, validating Bane's prior warning. Following Armo Thunderhorn's guidance, Horde agents were dispatched to pacify the spirits using a magical drum. The recent cataclysm brought significant alterations to the Red Cloud Mesa, which endured substantial damage as it came under siege from the Bristleback Quillboar, who expanded their territory from the Brambleblade Ravine. Garrosh Hellscream and Bane Bloodhoof, both now leaders of their respective people, spearheaded the invasion to eradicate the local Quillboar. Additionally, numerous bristleback Quillboars abandoned their traditional habitat to assist in seizing new territory from the Tauren in a location called the Thornsnarl. At the same time, Grimtotem rebels, unwilling to pledge allegiance to Jevon Grimtotem and Bane Bloodhoof, took over and poisoned the sacred water wells in the region. In response, young Tauren were asked to help push back the bristleback Quillboar, while the Tauren accepted aid from all Horde members in dealing with the Grimtotem and other threats to the area. Despite often escaping the devastation of wars across Azeroth over the years, Thunderbluff fell prey to the Burning Legion. During the Burning Legion's third invasion of Azeroth, Thunderbluff was targeted by Infernals. Fortunately, they were defeated, and the city stood strong as the capital city for the Tauren and a base for all Horde members. During the battle for Azeroth, a contingent of the Venture Company goblins returned to Mulgore with considerable force, targeting the belongings of Sheza Wildmane, a Tauren who operated the Elder Rise drum shop in Thunderbluff. With resources acquired from this raid, or from selling the stolen goods, the Venture Company goblins established a camp in Mulgore once again, this time just east of Thunderbluff. And around the same period, Thunderbluff hosted a feast for the High Mountain Tauren from High Mountain on the Broken Shore. The entire city celebrated the discovery of a long-lost Tauren tribe with fireworks until it came under attack by minions of the Old Gods, who sensed the presence of Spirit Walker Ebonhorn, the uncorrupted son of Deathwing himself. The Old God forces attempted to corrupt the aspect of the Black Dragonflight and trapped the city's civilians with void power, rendering them unresponsive. Horde adventurers, along with Bane Bloodhoof, his personal guards, and the city guards, defended Thunderbluff, defeating the void minions and saving the city. During this period, Sylvanas Windrunner gradually converted the Underhold, a massive underground compound deep below Orgrimmar, accessed through an elevator within Ragefire Chasm, into a military installation. She used it to train her elite soldiers and manufacture Azerite weapons. Bane Bloodhoof was captured and imprisoned in the Underhold Nexus. In a story for another time, Bane was later rescued by Thrall and Jaina Proudmoore, who feared Sylvanas Windrunner would lay waste to Thunderbluff as she did to Teldrassil. Thunderbluff citizens supported Varrock Saurfang in his rebellion against Sylvanas. Although Bane's injuries prevented him from joining Saurfang's march to Orgrimmar, G. Firepaw, Acer Cloudsinger, Mela High Mountain, and their forces reinforced the city's defences just in case Sylvanas launched a counterattack. During the conflict, Saurfang challenged Sylvanas to a Mac Groa, resulting in his death and Sylvanas' abandonment of the Horde. A stunned Lord Thamar ordered champions to inform Bane of the events. With Thunderbluff no longer threatened by Sylvanas' forces, the reinforcements departed the city as Bane, G, and Mela travelled to Orgrimmar to attend to Varrock Saurfang's funeral. Following the Fourth War, Zekan conveyed that the Tauren residing in Mulgore continued to encounter numerous challenges within the region. These included the presence of the Venture Company to the east, null threats looming from the west, and the menace of the Grim Totem tribe, who persistently targeted the Tauren, particularly focusing on the water resources of Thunderbluff. The concluding chapter of Thunderbluff's lore unfolds during the period known as Death Rising. The city faced a brutal assault from the Moorsworn, minions serving Zoval the Jailer in the Moor within the Shadowlands. These ruthless invaders laid waste to the tranquil streets and captured Bane Bloodhoof. Imprisoned by the Moorsworn, Bane faced judgment by the Jailer, where his spirit suffered wounds deemed unworthy by the Eternal One. As a consequence, Bane was cast off a platform by the Jailer's decree. However, a timely rescue effort led by Thrall, Anduin Wrynn, Jaina Proudmoore, and Azeroth's champions managed to mend Bane's spirit and save him from further peril. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting its golden hues upon the rolling plains of Mulgore, we bid farewell to the tales of this land. And there we have it, another World of Warcraft Lore Supercut wrapped up and added to the library. Wherever you are out there in the world, whatever you're doing, I hope you enjoyed this Horde-themed Lore World Tour.